Are you thinking of buying, selling, or investing in real estate, but you don't know where to start? Have you searched for a realtor who will be nearby when they are needed, who will answer your calls and emails, who will go the extra mile to ensure your every need is met, who will help you with sourcing and supplying contractors while negotiating the best deal possible? Do you need a realtor who does not believe in high-pressure sales tactics or other gimmicks? Then you need me. My name is Steve Roy, and I offer a full-service professional sales and customized marketing package for my clients. I am helping clients with buying, selling, and investing. I will build a custom plan to fit your needs. I will work closely with you to ensure that you achieve your goals. My services include not only an analysis of your local market and correct pricing, but I will also help you to prepare your home for sale and make it look as desirable as possible to buyers by providing expert advice, using professional quality photographs, and compelling descriptions. Let me help you minimize cost and maximize your profits. Call me today, 207-649-8522.
And I came here in 1986 to run it for myself, and I signed the papers, and I was owner of the Red Barn Incorporated. People come in here for the experience, more so than I think anything else. And they love the fact that somebody's actually taking the time to listen. Maybe you learn in proportion to how much you listen and care. If you can find that balance between doing what you love that isn't really work, that might pay the bills, and can resonate with people, and actually to some extent help people. Without my customers, I would be doing what I don't love, guaranteed.
Today's Kennebec Valley Forum is brought to you by Dan and Scott's Cremation and Funeral Service, Sunset Flowerland and Greenhouses, and KSW Federal Credit Union.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Kennebec Valley Forum. Today we're visiting with Mr. Chuck Lakin. He's going to talk about things that you should know before you go. Good morning, Chuck. Thanks for spending some time here. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
Okay, I'm a woodworker, and as my avocation, and then I was a reference librarian at Colby for 22 years, which is
wow.
One of the reasons I'm in town. And I had the experience of my father's death. It had been a very personal thing right up until the time he died. When he was at home, I was there for the last month of his life. He was in his own bed with his wife and 4 kids touching him when he died. It was a very personal experience right up to that point. And then we didn't know what to do, so we called a funeral director who did what I'm sure he thought we wanted him to do, which was arrive promptly, zip Dad in a body bag, and haul him away. And 4 days later, we got a box of ashes in the mail, and I hated that.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until almost 20 years later that I found a manual written by a woman in California who was trying to help people take care of their own dead. And so I started talking about home funerals, and wasn't much interest at the time, or I didn't have many people to talk about. But I learned more, and people got more interested, and right around 2008, 2009, the articles started appearing in national media about alternatives to conventional funerals. And so as I learned more about that, it became clear to me that just like my situation, people don't plan ahead and had no real idea of what all their alternatives were.
Right.
Other than just calling, they knew they could call a funeral director, but they have other choices. And so what I'm trying to do now is to give people the information they need to make good choices about what happens to their body after they're dying.
Awesome.
And you think this is a morbid discussion, but it's actually, I think, fairly entertaining. And if I can't make you laugh sometime during this,
Yeah, I bet you can.
I'm slipping.
Well, go ahead and start us off as to where we should begin and
Okay.
be thinking about.
First thing is, before we even get to funerals, I want to talk about paperwork towards the end.
Sure.
That everybody ought to have in place. Everybody ought to have a will. And people think that I'm not going to go, it's too expensive, and I don't want to talk to a lawyer, and one thing and another. But Maine is a state that has a statutory will form. And you can buy this for $1 at the probate office of any county courthouse, but you can also, one other thing I gotta step back in.
Yeah.
Some friends and I have, it's not a business, but we have an organization that's intended to help people figure all this stuff out and write it down, and if they want to have a home funeral, we can help you with that experience. We will not do it for you, but we will guide you through the process of doing that. And that group is called Last Things, and it has a website that's called lastthings.net. And on that website, you will find, there are 2 pages in particular on that website. One is called Planning Ahead, and the other is called Funeral Options. And those 2 pages on that website outline everything I'm going to say here today.
Okay.
And so you don't have to really remember anything except that there's this lastthings.net, and where you can see all this stuff, and then my contact information, and the contact information for the other people that know what they're talking about is right there on the website.
Right.
And
Good.
so if you have questions,
That's good.
we love it, you know, and like I said, I'm a reference librarian, and you cannot ask too many questions.
Aha.
But, so you have this statutory will form that you can pick up at the probate office, but you can also print a copy from a PDF file that's accessible to everybody on the Planning Ahead page of the Last Things website.
Great.
And it tells you how to fill it out. It gives you the spaces you need for all the common things that people would normally write in their wills, and then tells you how to have it signed. And so it's a perfectly valid will. It's, you know, it's obviously it's for simple estates or simple situations. You know, you're not going to be able to set up a living trust by doing this.
No.
But everybody, you know, it just makes life for your survivors so much easier if you have a will. So you don't have to start the whole process and wait a month for anything to really happen. It's worth it to do that. The second piece of paper everybody ought to have is an advance directive. An advance directive is a set of instructions to the medical establishment about how you wanted to be treated in the event that you can't make medical decisions for yourself. You know, you're in an automobile accident, you're in the hospital, and you're delusional or whatever it is. But this gives the medical establishment some guidance. The advance directives are made up of two parts. And one is a power of attorney for health care. And in the power of attorney, you're able to authorize up to 3 people to make health care decisions for you in the event that you can't make them for yourself. And the other part of it is special instructions, which is the living will part, where you have places here where you can say, a choice to be not to be kept alive, choice to be kept alive in different situations. Sure. I think, though, that the choices that you have there on the advance directive there aren't very many choices, and they sort of give you a general outline of your attitude towards what's going to happen to you towards the end of your life, which is why I think that the pages on which you are designating somebody else to authorize, you're authorizing other people to make healthcare decisions for you is the critical phase right here. Okay. Because you've got 3 people you can authorize here, but it's not a committee. No. If they can contact the first person, that person makes the decision. If not, they go to number 2, and if not, they get them, they go to number 3.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But you need to make sure that those people, one, they know that you're doing this, and that you have a conversation with them so that they understand what your values are when you get down towards the end of your life. And it's kind of hard to start a discussion about that. And so there's a group called Compassion and Choices that if you want to know anything about any end-of-life issue, you could do far worse than taking a look at the Compassion and Choices website, which is just compassionandchoices.org. They wrote this healthcare decisions quiz, and it's just, and you can print this off right from the Last Things website, and it's just 2 pages. There are 5 paragraphs that describe a common medical situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then they ask you, for the first one, you're talking about, you've got Alzheimer's, you're diagnosed with pneumonia, and it'll be fatal unless it's treated with antibiotics. Do you want antibiotics? Yes, no, or uncertain. And so you answer these questions, but then the clever part is that you give this same quiz to the 3 people you've authorized to make decisions
Really?
for you.
Yeah.
And you ask them how they would answer those questions for you.
Yeah.
And if they don't answer the same way you did, that's the start of the conversation.
Right.
So I think that's a really helpful way to do it.
I would think that's pretty much essential to doing the planning part of it.
And the other part reason I think this is really true is that the special instructions here, or the living will, they're just answering questions, and you have in one situation. But as you're getting towards the end of your life, your health starts to fail. You say you've got this scale, you're dead to you're perfectly in perfect health. And say you answer those questions, and when you're up here at the 80 or 90% level.
Yeah.
Well, when you're at the 50 or 40% level, your answer to those questions might be quite different than it would be if you're at that 80 or 90% level.
Right.
But there's no provision here on the instructions for you to be able to say that. But the people that that you're authorizing to, that's why it's critical to have people that understand your values, because they will understand and be able to make decisions that will more closely match the choices you would make depending on the state of your health too. So this is actually a pretty important document. And after you fill it out, you make multiple copies of this, because you should have one in a file at home, which includes all the pieces of paper that we'll talk about and a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, each one of these people needs to have a copy of this form,
Okay.
because they need to show it to the medical establishment when they come in, when they get called and come in.
Yeah.
And your doctor ought to have one, and you ought to have a discussion with your doctor
Yep.
about those choices. And put one in the glove compartment of your car, for instance.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, frequently the reason somebody shows up at an emergency room after having been in an automobile accident, they can't talk.
Right.
And the medical establishment wants to know where to go, but the EMTs that arrive are gonna be taking care of the body, but the police will arrive too, and they're gonna be looking in the glove compartment of your car to try to find out who you are. And they'll find your advance directives, which will then go with you to the hospital.
Another thing that goes with that I already do is keep a list of the medications in the glove compartment.
Yes. So put your advance directive right along there with it.
Yep.
Good idea there. But then there's also, it can be getting kind of complicated, but this is maybe the best living will I've ever seen. And you can print a copy of this out from the Last Things website too, but I gotta read this to you. And you can just tell from the picture on it that it's kind of a cartoon.
Yes.
It says, I, being of sound mind and body, do not wish to be kept alive indefinitely by artificial means. Under no circumstances should my fate be put in the hands of pinhead politicians who couldn't pass 9th grade biology if their lives depended on it, or lawyers/doctors interested in simply running up the bills. If a reasonable amount of time passes and I fail to ask for at least one of the following: a glass of wine, chocolate, sex, martini, Mexican food, chocolate, French fries, chocolate, pizza, sex, or ice cream, it should be presumed that I won't ever get better. When such a determination is reached, I hereby instruct my appointed person and attending physicians to pull the plug, reel in the tubes, let the fat lady sing, and call it a day.
There you go. That's pretty simple.
But that's my attitude.
Yeah.
you know, I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to spend a lot of money that prolongs my death, not my life.
Right.
And spends money and causes needless suffering.
Right.
And just let me go.
Yep.
And while I'm hopefully ready for it,
Right.
I'm conscious and ready for it.
Yep.
And the other thing that everybody ought to have is some way to continue their financial life. And it can be as simple as just putting a trusted friend or relative on a checking account, say, so that they could pay bills and
Sure.
deposit checks, or
Sure.
keep the finances going. It could be as fancy as a financial durable power of attorney. And Maine has a form for it, and there's a link on the Last Things website to a site from which you can print out a financial durable power of attorney form for Maine.
Mm-hmm.
There are advantages and disadvantages to each one of them, and I can't make the decision for you, but this, you know, a financial durable power of attorney gives a person complete control over your finances. I mean, you're in a hospital and they could sell your house and run away with the money if they wanted to.
Yep.
But then again, you put somebody that's, you didn't know how trustworthy they were on your checking account, and they can disappear with the money too.
Sure,
But, you know,
absolutely.
what you're after, you just want some way to continue the, you don't want your house to get foreclosed on because you weren't able to make payments on it. Or,
Right.
you know, you don't want them to shut off the water or electricity because the bills aren't being paid.
Right.
So those are the pieces of paper, the legal documents that everybody ought to have.
Yep.
But then the next step is to figure out what you want to have happen to your body when you die.
Mm-hmm.
And you write it down and you have a conversation with the family about what those wishes are.
Yep.
I'm sure you've heard stories about people whose families that were torn apart because kids couldn't agree on what should happen to a parent's body when they died.
Right.
And so what you want, that's just because they never had that discussion. You know, people don't want to talk about dying. But it's a real gift to your survivors. If you had figured this stuff out, made the, you know, collected documents and done this sort of thing, and then had that conversation with them, so they know what your wishes are, and they know where all this other stuff is.
Right.
And you don't necessarily gonna completely resolve any conflicts at that time, because
Right.
it's a really emotional time when, you know, your parent dies.
Sure.
Or a child dies. But you can certainly go some distance to making it less likely that that's gonna happen. And they are not gonna have to make potentially expensive decisions at a very emotional time.
Right. Yep.
And so that figuring it out, writing it down, and having the conversation with the family is a very important thing, I think.
I agree with you 100%. That's.
And so, in an attempt to start the conversation, you know, one thing that just that healthcare decisions quiz could be the kind of thing that could get the conversation started with your family too.
Oh, absolutely.
But then there are also on the Last Things website, there are links to 3 national organizations. And their purpose is to help families have that conversation. And so if you just look at the steps that they lead you through, pretty simple steps they lead you through, there'll be some suggestions that you will find helpful to you to be able to have that conversation with your family.
Yep.
And the same thing is true, you know, if whoever's watching this, if, for example, you know, you're in your mid-40s, you've got kids, but are your parents still alive, and do you know what their wishes are?
Right.
So you're not only writing, you're starting the thing for you to tell your kids, or the people who are gonna be your survivors, but if you don't know that same information
Yep.
for your parents, or your relatives don't have that information written down, or you haven't had that discussion, I highly recommend it.
And the earlier you start, I think the better off you are, because there are no guarantees in life. Sometimes when we're younger, we think we're invincible. And nothing is farther from the truth, that anything can happen at any time. And I agree that conversation should start way back when.
Mhm.
If you've got children, anything can happen to them, anything can happen to you. Do some planning, think about it.
Yeah. And just get realistic, you know?
Yep.
It's, I think that death used to be a part of everybody's life.
Right.
Because, you know, like in 1900, the average lifespan in the United States was 46.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, right now, today, it's in the 76 range.
Yep.
And by 1935, the average lifespan was up to 63. And the real difference in that time period was nothing more than public health, because basically they figured out that you provide clean water and good sewage disposal, and a lot of those waterborne or diseases got taken care of. You know, medical technology and antibiotics and all this stuff came after that. But you know, when 1 out of 5 children didn't live to age 5.
Right.
And
Absolutely right.
people would die from infections, childhood diseases, and accidents that today would have been, they would survive.
Sure.
So death was a part of everybody's life, and people knew what to do because they had seen it around, and everybody was living closer together, and so the neighbors were right there to help you out.
Sure.
When things, and so people knew what to do. But people don't know what to do any longer.
Right.
And so it's not, they don't see it the same way. You know, when I'm talking to a group of people and ask them how many people have actually been in a room with a dead body that wasn't in a funeral home, and it's rare for more than half the people to raise their hand.
Right.
And so of course you're afraid of it for good reasons in one way, but it's also because it's not, you don't see it regularly.
Right.
And it's the unknown things that you're afraid of.
Right.
But you know it's gonna happen.
Sure is.
And it's
Either that or they're gonna
recycled.
tax you to death, one or the other.
Same end. You end up in the same place that way. So it's that whole thing, because I'll come back to that. Any chance it gets close in the conversation, I'll come back to figure it out, write it down, have the conversation with the family.
Yep.
And when you have that written down, you know, along with the other papers, you also include the things like where are deeds, titles, certificates, you know, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates.
Yep.
Where insurance policies, where do you do your banking? Do you have investments? Where are they? You know, all that kind of an outline of your financial life is is really valuable to the person who's going to be taking care of your estate after you die.
It's absolutely right.
I was talking to a group once, and one person just started laughing when I was saying that, because she had to tell us a story that when her father died, he was always kind of secretive, and it took them about a year before they finally found the last of the 12 bank accounts that he had scattered all the way around the small town they were living in.
Yeah.
You know, they had no idea. It
No.
really complicated the process.
All right.
So you can make it pretty simple
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very
So that's basically what I have to say about, you know, paperwork, planning ahead, writing it down.
Well, let's go into the death itself, Chuck,
Okay,
and
so-
talk about things that happen at death and what you can do, what you can't do, what's the law say, and those
So
types of
I'll
things.
start off, I'll just talk about the options you have for in-ground burial, and then for cremation,
Yep.
and then for body donation.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go back and see what we come up with to talk
Sure.
about after that.
Yeah, there you go.
So, for in-ground burial, the first one is obviously call a funeral director. I am not knocking funeral directors. I think they have a very tough job to do, and most of them do it very well,
Mm-hmm.
and provide a real service to people. There are, one of the things, if you're gonna talk to a funeral director, I highly recommend this Federal Trade Commission booklet that's called Shopping for Funeral Services. And it's, there's a link to an online copy of this right on the funeral options page of the Last Things website. But it outlines the provisions of the funeral rule, which is the federal law that regulates the funeral industry. So if you're gonna talk to a funeral director, it's worth your while to have read this booklet, because it outlines his responsibilities and your rights when you're talking to one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you'll have a good idea what's when you're going, well, you still don't know what it's gonna be like, but you'll have an idea of
Sure.
what's the decisions you need to make, and what he can and can't say, and what he has to
Yeah.
provide you and show you. And there are also links there to on the website to 2 online directories of funeral homes, because it's always a good idea to talk to more than one.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd be surprised at the range of prices and the range of services. But it's also, as much as anything, it's, you know, you have Shaw's and Hannaford's or
Yep.
your major grocery stores, and everybody pretty much chooses one or the other.
Right,
And they're basically providing the same service, but you like this one instead of that one.
right.
And the same thing may be true with the funerals.
Absolutely. It's like anything. I'm sure that you like some people, personalities fit, and you feel comfortable, and sometimes you don't. And it's nothing, it's not a personality thing, it's just the way life is. Either you have a comfortable feeling or you don't.
So you want to be dealing with the people that you like, or
Right.
that respond to you and seem to be trying to help you have the experience you want and need to have at this time.
Yep, I agree with that.
So right now, the average funeral in the United States costs about $7,500, and that's exclusive of cemetery costs. Cemetery costs, when you count in buying a plot, buying a vault, which is that concrete box that most conventional cemeteries require,
You're right.
and then opening and closing the grave, you're probably spending a minimum of $2,500 there.
Right.
And after you're buried, the bronze plaque starts at about $1,200, and a monument starts at around $2,000. So you see the real cost of the average funeral in the United States is in the $11,000 to $12,000 range. The other end of the scale is a home funeral.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfectly legal in Maine for a family to take care of their own dead without needing to involve a funeral director in any part of the process. You can keep the body at home, wash it, dress it, move it around, and there are links to manuals and videos on the Last Things website that will guide you through the process. And in addition, you have on the About Us page of the Last Things website, you have the contact information for 6 people in the state that know what they're doing and can guide you through the process. We will not do it for you, but we will guide you through the process, help you have the experience you want to have if you want to try it.
Yeah.
You can make your own coffin.
Yeah.
And there's a coffins page on the Last Things website with 6 different plans for making a coffin, from the simplest thing I could think of that somebody without any woodworking experience could make, up to you can download a 13 megabyte file that shows you how I make coffins that have no metal parts in them and sloped sides and things like that.
Yeah.
And making the coffin, by the way, is a very healing process, because you're participating in the process. And men particularly find that to be a very helpful thing to do for themselves, and just being part of the process and doing that for your family member is a remarkable experience.
I remember, and I have to tell you the story about a fellow that passed away in New Sharon, and he lived by the old tradition that he made his own coffin and did his own planning. His oldest son was the one that dug the grave, the one that put the first spade full of dirt on it, because nobody else could throw dirt on him. And that's the way it was. And then he was laid out in a pile around a marble table, and that's why they had the funeral and the food and everything else that they enjoyed there. It was quite something to see, and it goes back to when I was a kid. You know, a lot of people used to do that. Nobody had a whole lot of money to do stuff with, and so they did it on their own for the most part.
And I think it's a very healing thing to do, a very personal thing to do.
Yes.
Which is why you'll hear me say a conventional cemetery, or a conventional funeral, which is what the funeral director does, as opposed to the traditional funeral or ceremony, which is a home funeral, because that's the way it was done for millennia up until about 100 years ago, when the whole process became professionalized.
Right.
But you can still do it for yourself if you want to.
Yeah.
So you've got, I've talked about where the information is on how you would take care of the body, and then talking about a coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're dealing with a funeral director, you can still make your own coffin.
Right.
A funeral director may not refuse to use a coffin you made yourself or bought elsewhere, and they can't charge you a fee for doing so.
Right.
There's a page on the website that tells you how to do the paperwork, and which can be pretty daunting unless you have somebody guiding you through the process, and that's what we've tried to do right there. The first person the page is titled The Dreaded Paperwork, because the first person we talked to in Maine who tried to do a home funeral said the paperwork was the worst part of the process. It took her 2 days to get the paperwork done because she didn't know what she was doing, and people who didn't know that she could do it or didn't know how to help her.
Right.
But when my father-in-law died, I knew, in theory, the process, and so I went to the 3 people I needed to see after his death before the death.
Yeah.
So I knew where they were, I knew what I needed, and I knew what I needed to bring to them, and I knew what I was going to get from them.
Right.
It took me an hour and 20 minutes to do the paperwork.
Wow.
And half of that, of course, was driving from place to place, because
Sure.
they weren't conveniently located right next to one another. So it can be a daunting process if you have no idea what you're doing, but the Last Things website is intended to give you the information you need to have that experience. If you care to do it and you want to make that choice, you can do it. And it's a very rewarding experience. The last piece of paperwork you get is legal authority to transport the body from wherever it is to the place of final disposition, cemetery or the burial plot or the crematory. Right now, a home funeral would cost you almost nothing, but if you were buried in a conventional cemetery, you would still have the same cemetery costs.
Right.
But there are 2 versions, or 2 alternatives there. One is a green cemetery. A green cemetery is one in which bodies buried there may not be embalmed. Whatever they're buried, they don't allow the use of vaults. Whatever they're buried in has to be biodegradable. A pine box, a cardboard box, a shroud made of natural materials,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you choose. They don't allow monuments. Instead, they mark the graves. You find a stone somewhere on or near the property, and you just have it engraved with the name and dates, and it's set in so that it's basically at ground level, so you can see the grave, but it's not prominent. And the green cemeteries are just natural pieces of land. They don't cut down trees and create trails through the woods to be able to get you to where you want to be able to find a spot where you want to be buried. And they don't bury people just in rows. That you go pick the spot that you want to be buried, and so they have a much lower density of graves in a green cemetery. And the last thing about them is they usually bury bodies only about 3 to 3.5 feet deep, which is the lower limit at which aerobic decomposition takes place. So it's kind of like composting yourself or recycling yourself, because you're putting all the nutrients in your body right back into the system. So you're feeding microbes and worms and plants.
Yeah.
And reusing the body. It's by far the greenest alternative you have.
Right.
For and a decision about what happens to your body after you die. And a variation on that is it's legal in Maine for you to be buried on your own property, as long as like I have a 1/3 of an acre lot in the middle of Waterville, and they're not going to let me be buried in my backyard. But if I were on the outskirts, there would be no problem with that. The state just wants you to create a family burying ground. And the process is pretty straightforward. Within within distances of water sources and things like that, all they say is that the piece of property, the family burying ground, cannot be more than a 1/4 of an acre in size. A 1/4 of an acre, though, is 100 feet by 100 feet.
Right.
More than 100 feet by 100 feet, which is a pretty good
Yeah.
spot. It has to be set aside or, set apart from the rest of the land by a fence, a hedge, a row of rocks, something which says this is different from the rest of the property. But you've seen the cemetery fences, which are nothing more than a row of pipes.
Sure.
10 feet apart with a chain or a wire rope draped between them. You're not trying to keep anybody in or out, you're just setting this piece of the property visually aside. And then the last thing you do is you register the family burying ground on the property deed. The effect of doing that is that your family owns that family burying ground forever.
Right.
Even if the rest of the property is sold, that family burying ground still belongs to your family, and whoever does own the property can't keep your family from having reasonable access for visits or maintenance.
Right.
So, burial in a green cemetery, because you don't have the vault and what you're buried in is going to be relatively simple. The plot, there are 2 green cemeteries in Maine, and for both of them, the plot plus the opening and closing costs was about $1,200. So if you tossed in another $300 just for round numbers to say that to get that stone engraved, you're talking about $1,500 instead of $3,500 plus.
Right.
And so and you can be a funeral, even if you're dealing with a funeral director, you can be buried in a green cemetery. I mean, it doesn't have to be doing it yourself. So
right.
that price savings would still be the same. And but a home funeral and you're buried in your backyard, your cost is as close to zero as you're going to get.
Right.
And you have this experience.
Yeah, it is the experience, yes.
So those are kind of the options for in-ground burial. And for cremation, again, you call a funeral director. Right now, the average cremation in the United States costs a little over $6,000, but that includes, the full services.
Yeah.
Embalming, visitation, services in the funeral home, the whole works.
Yep.
And again, the same thing is true, that the other end of the scale is the family can take care of the body. Even if the body's going to be cremated, the family can still do the whole process themselves. The funeral part is what happens between the death and the final disposition, so it's the same thing whether you're going to be buried or cremated. You'd go through the same steps. But you can't do the cremation part yourself.
No, that's kind of against the law. People have tried that. It hasn't worked out so well.
Yeah, that's the problem. The first time you do it, you're not going to get it done right.
No.
Or even the second time, probably.
Right.
If you did decide to do a home funeral followed by a cremation, your basic cost would be the crematory fee, because the last piece of paperwork that you would do is your legal authority to transport the body, and you can take it to a cemetery, the crematory, or your family burying ground. Average cremation fee, and the crematory fee in Maine is going to run somewhere between $300 and $375. And you can buy the alternative cremation container, which is the large cardboard box, which you can be buried in too if you want to.
Yeah.
You can buy from the crematories usually for about $30. And you can buy them from funeral directors too, but the price will be higher from them because they're going to be marking it up a little.
Sure.
So
does that box, if let's say they have cardboard boxes, obviously, because they don't want to burn coffins and stuff to do the cremation. What makes the requirements for that cardboard box? What can it be and what can it be?
Well, you want to buy these because they aren't, they don't just recycle refrigerator boxes.
Yeah.
They are made to fit the same normal coffin size, and cardboard is actually a fairly strong material, and then when you fold it back on yourself and things kind of snap together, that'll make a box that will actually support a body up to like 250 pounds. And some of those cremation containers, actually, it's just the top of it, a 5-sided box that goes on top of a piece of something like oriented strand board that has strapping nailed to the sides to create a lip there, and so that 5-sided box is open on the bottom and just fits down with the body after you place the body on it. So, you know, but either one, you can be buried or cremated in either one. And you can be cremated in a wooden coffin.
Yeah.
For both my in-laws, I made the coffins in which they were cremated.
Sure.
So they can do it, but you need to, you're going to a crematory, the body needs to be in a rigid container.
Yeah.
They don't handle bodies, you know, they're not gonna take the body out
Just
of
put them in the oven.
They're gonna transfer them.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go to a crematorium and go through the process a while ago, and that was very interesting. And I suggest if anybody's thinking about that, to go visit one and talk to the people.
Yes.
So to have some comfort level with it. Some people are afraid of being burned or something like that, and I understand the fear, as you do of dying. You know, it's a natural thing, but it can go a lot easier if you go talk to people, or come talk to you, Chuck, as far as that goes, and,
Sure, which
and you
need
could
this
explain
knowledge
the
and
process.
reassurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a couple of other things I want to mention about cremation. One
Sure.
is there are direct cremation services now. These are businesses that are run by a funeral director, but they do only do cremations. So they'll pick up the body, hold it for the required 48 hours. They'll provide the alternative cremation container, the cardboard box, do the paperwork, transport the body to the crematory, and get the ashes back to the family. And there's a list on a link to a list on the website of the places that I know of in Maine who will do that for less than $1,300.
Yeah.
And the lowest price I know of in the state is $850.
Yeah.
And so you can see you have this range of choices just in prices from $6,000 is the average cost, but by choosing specific services instead of packages, you can pay less than that from a funeral director. But you have also the direct cremation service, which you will not have the visitations and services, but you can do that yourself at any location you choose. But you'll be paying around $1,000, and then if the family did the home funeral followed by a cremation, it's going to cost you in the $350, $400 range.
Yep. This program is sponsored by Dan and Scott's Cremation in Skowhegan, and that's a good place to start talking to people.
They're on the list of people who
Yep.
do it for less than $1,300.
That's right, and being a sponsor here, I just have to make people aware that they do exist upon Skowhegan Road.
They're experienced, they're good people.
They are good people, right? But that doesn't mean you're gonna have to end up there. You wanna talk, as you said, to other people. You know, it's no different than going into Shaw's and getting groceries and then going over to IGA and looking at their prices, and that's where you make decisions, make good decisions. So where do we go from the cremation?
Whole body donation. So that's the other alternative. If you want to donate your body to science, the first option is that there's a medical school at the University of New England, Biddeford, and they accept bodies from Maine that they use to teach anatomy to first-year medical students. You have to apply to that program, and there's a link on the Last Things website to the body donor program at the University of New England. So you were selected because there are reasons why they do or would not be able to use your body. But you also have to have a backup plan, because when you die, something may have happened that would not make it possible for them to use your body. So you need to have a backup plan, even though you've made that arrangement. And when you do die, you have a card. Your survivors make one phone call. They send a funeral director up to pick up the body. They embalm it, but the embalming they do takes 70 days, I understand. You know, what a funeral director does takes a couple of hours, and it's only intended to delay decomposition for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And what they may need to keep a body around for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so it's a much more thorough embalming process. But after the process is over, they will cremate the bodies, and then they will have a service at the end of the school year at the school, and the families of course will be invited, and the students who worked on that person will usually be at the cemetery at the celebration of
Yes.
the two.
Yeah.
And then the family, they have a memorial garden where you can scatter the ashes or bury the ashes, or you can take the ashes home and do with them what you will.
Yeah.
Tufts University in Boston will also accept bodies from Maine, and you can apply in advance, but you also can call them right at the time of death and ask them if they need a body. But it's you never know what in that case.
Right.
But there's also a link on the website to the body donor program at Tufts University. Then there are also body donor companies. And these are businesses that are basically middlemen, because they have people that are asking them for bodies or parts of bodies to use for research or experimentation or education. And so they will pick up any body after a death, and then will, at no charge to the family, they will pick up the body, and then they will sell that body or parts of that body to whoever is asking them what the appropriate use is. And again, it'll be for research or education or education or experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually within a couple of months, that's whatever it's done is finished, and then they will cremate the body and get the ashes back to the family. There are some people in that business. Well, a body can be worth as much as $80,000 to the body donor company. And with that amount of money involved in the process, there are some people that might get a little bit greedy in there.
Absolutely.
Or be a little less than ethical about the whole process.
Absolutely.
So, but it's hard to tell. But there's a link to a list on the website of all the body donor companies in the U.S. And so you can see their websites and you can talk to them to make a decision about that. And then there is also a link to a 4-part National Public Radio series on human tissue and body donation,
Mm-hmm.
and a link to a video, a 50-minute video about body donor companies.
Mm-hmm.
I was a librarian. I'm in the business of providing information.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to give people everything they need to know in order to make a good decision.
Sure. That's important.
So that's basically the outline of the planning ahead page, and then the funeral options page on the Last Things website. And then you have contact information there for people who would be able to help you out if you had any further questions.
Yeah.
And there will be,
that's a great service.
Somewhere in the video of this, there will be
A trailer of that.
a trailer
Yeah.
that will give you the Last Things website address and my phone number.
Yep.
So I'd be pleased to talk to anybody who has other questions.
That's good. You have a coffin here with you today, Chuck.
Oh, yeah.
Would you,
As I said, I'm a woodworker, and I think you get to play with things.
yeah,
And so,
can I help you?
nope, this is one of my favorite coffin designs that I have here. And obviously it stores flat. And this is obviously also not a full-size coffin, but I'm getting, it's hard to carry around a full-size coffin. And I'm getting lazier in my old age. But I do get a kick out of this, because these are the end pieces. And this is one of the side pieces.
Okay.
So these are tenons,
Yep.
and you can see a slot in the tenon because this is called a wedged tenon construction.
Oh, yeah.
And this hole is a mortise.
Yep.
So the tenon goes right through the mortise,
Yep.
and then it's all held together just with
A wedge.
simple wedges. I'm only gonna put one in there just to kind of hold it in position, but you can see there's two places where you would put it in there.
Yep, can we turn this around a little bit?
This
Yeah.
is- Well, I'll put the other side on so
Okay.
you'll be able to see it here.
Just trying to get, so we get a better view of it.
So you see, then the other side goes on.
Yep.
It's right together. And what did I do with it?
Right on the other side.
There they go. And so then you put the other side on. The handles are integral to the construction. So you can see those will fit right in those, you see the dowel, just slide
Yep.
those in those two holes
Yep.
right there.
Yep.
And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Now, there we go. The bottom piece, there are cleats around the bottom edge of both the ends and sides.
Yep.
And so the bottom piece just slides right in and rests right on there. And then you put the other end on. And the only tricky part here is that you need to
Coordinate a little bit on everything.
just lift up the handle so you can slide those dowel pins
Yeah.
right into the holes in the
Wow. There you go.
sides. And again, you just put a couple of wedges in to hold it. And then you see the slots in the upper corners
Yep.
of the sides?
Yep.
And this is the lid. And so you can see the cleats on the underside.
Yeah.
And there's a slot in the cleat too.
Oh, yeah.
And so wedges hold the top on, because it'll just slide right. And then you just put a wedge right in there.
Yep.
In the slot.
Absolutely.
And
Isn't
so
that amazing? What a nice job.
store it, it's, I think I like the way it looks.
Yes,
And you can store
absolutely.
it flat, you can put it
Yep.
under your bed.
Yep.
The
You
other
can
thing I
finish
do-
it, do whatever you want to with
There's the woman who wrote the manual that first taught me what I wanted to know about home funerals, and calls decorating the coffin a healing act of art therapy. And I think that's absolutely true. So all my coffin designs have broad, flat, clean surfaces,
it. Mm-hmm.
which I hope invite decoration.
Yeah.
Because it lets people participate personally in the
That's
process.
what the old, back in 1900, the late 1890s, whenever, that's what they did. They all participated, whether it was the oldest boy digging the grave or what it was, they all participated in the funeral. And there was not so much for shock because it was a gradual thing.
Right, you didn't,
There was
the
some
body wasn't
finality
just
to it.
whisked away, and then
Yeah.
you see it again a couple days later at a visitation, and then that's the last time you see it. You're there with the body
Yep.
for the whole time. And decorating the coffin, some friends of mine bought one of these for the woman's mother, and she got a kick out of having the coffin in her home.
Yeah.
For about the last 6 weeks of her life, and so
Yeah.
she would brag about it to her friends. And then when she died, the couple actually said they found it healing to assemble the coffin themselves, even though it was at a funeral home. They used a funeral home. But then before the service, the family wrote on the inside of the coffin then what they wanted to say.
Yeah.
And then during the service, they invited anybody who was there to write what they wanted to on the outside.
Yeah. That's
They
awesome.
sent me a picture
Yeah.
of the lid of the coffin. It was just covered with little notes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the hospice chaplain was there, and she said it was the most moving service she'd been to in 35 years of going to funerals. And I don't think it was just because of that decoration of the coffin, but I think that was certainly a part of it, because again, you were giving people the chance to express their grief.
Right.
In a physical way.
Yeah.
The other thing that I got, that leads me right into talking about the experience of my father's death. He was cremated, and the memorial service was terrible, I thought. It was about the fraternal organization he was a member of and not about him.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I hated that.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful day in June, and we had just told people, if you'd like to, come on back to the house. We've got some food and beer and wine. If you care to join us, please do. And people sat around our backyard all afternoon, and we were eating and drinking and laughing and crying, and people were telling stories.
Yeah.
And it was terrific.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the acute phase of the bereavement process was over that afternoon, because I heard all these great stories about my father and things that I never knew before.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to figure out that, I got some real value out of hearing the stories, but I realized that I had given those people who told me a story a chance to express their grief too.
Oh, big time.
And so that was part of the whole healing process for everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
See, and I think rituals are important for some people, and I'm not knocking those at all, but I liked the really personal expressions.
Yeah. I can understand that. But that's a beautiful job. I'm just thinking here, that until you use it, you can use it for storage.
Actually, there's a woman in Waterville who bought one of these, and you see that the tenons are all in the same plane, so it stands upright very nicely.
Oh, wow.
So she had me put 3 shelves in it, and she uses it to store quilts in.
Oh, wow.
But her husband made her take it out of the bedroom because it was creeping him out. So now it's in her upstairs hallway.
Yeah.
And she laughs because she says she makes new friends, because people have heard that she has her coffin
Oh, yeah.
in her upstairs hallway, and they have to figure out a way to get invited over so they get a chance to see.
There you go. Yeah. So that's a nice job.
Yeah.
And all they gotta do is get onto the
Last Things website.
Last Thing website. If you Google it, you'll find it.
Or lastthings.net.
Yeah.
And they'll be in the trailer. You'll get that you'll see
The
that.
information will be on the trailer for sure.
The URL for the website and my phone number.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you. Appreciate it very much. It was a pleasure and very interesting and very entertaining.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I feel privileged to have had the chance to do this.
Yeah. And we'll see you next time on Kennebec Valley Forum. Thank you.